Before the birds began to sing, and before the sun kissed the hills of Zambara, a quiet woman named Amale sat at the edge of her straw-filled bed, staring at an old photograph. Her room was small, with cracked mud walls and a thatched roof that whispered when the wind passed. On the floor beside her sat a wooden bowl of water, still and cold, but all her focus was on the face in the picture. It was the face of her only child, Kwabena. She had raised him with nothing but her hands, her strength, and her prayers. His father, Obafemi, had vanished like smoke when Kwabena was only 5 years old. One morning he left for the city and never returned. No letter, no visit, no reason. Amale was left with a son to raise and a heart full of questions. In Zambara, people whispered, they always did. They called her the woman who couldn't keep a man. Some neighbors avoided her while others pitied her. But Amale didn't care for their opinions. She tightened her head wrap each morning, stood tall, and faced life like a lioness. She sold fruits in the market, bananas, pineapples, oranges. Her stall was under a giant mango tree. She worked under the sun until her feet swelled just to pay school fees. Every time she saw her son's dusty shoes coming home from school, she smiled with quiet pride. Now Kwabena was 21, a tall, thoughtful young man studying at the university, a place neither Amale nor her ancestors had ever dreamed of reaching. He was her light in the storm. She remembered the promise she made long ago, her hands raised toward the night sky. I will give him a future even if I have to crawl to do it, and indeed she had. But life, like the river, often turns without warning. Far away, in a buzzing town near the edge of the Ankara River, a young woman named Zethu stood outside her student hostel. She was 19 and full of color, bright eyes, big laughter, and wild dreams. Her roommates were teasing one another inside, but she stood quietly, combing her long black hair while watching the breeze dance through the leaves. Zethu was raised by her mother, Mama Jovia, a seamstress who stitched clothes late. Into the night by candlelight. Her mother's fingers were always sore, but she never complained. She loved Zethu with every thread she pulled. Zethu had never met her father. Mama Jovia spoke of him like a ghost, just a name, not a story. He left before Zethu could speak, her first word. And though Zethu smiled often, there was a deep hole inside her spirit, a space no amount of joy could fill. A silent ache like something was missing. She often stared at the stars and asked quietly, "Who are you, Father? Do you think of me?" One bright afternoon, the campus of Ntombi University burst into celebration. Exams had ended, and music floated across the lawns. Drums echoed, students danced, girls wore bright wrappers and braided their hair with beads. The air smelled of roasted maize and fried plantains. Kwabena wasn't one for parties. He preferred books and long walks, but his roommate Teboho had other plans. "Today you must come," Teboho insisted, pulling on a colorful shirt. "I have someone I want you to meet." Kwabena frowned, tying his laces slowly. "I don't like crowds." Teboho laughed. "She's different. Trust me, my brother. You will understand when you see her." Across campus, Zethu laughed with her friends under a palm tree, her earrings swinging as she danced. Her joy was infectious. She spun, laughed, and held a cup of sobolo in one hand. She didn't know that fate was circling, ready to strike. Teboho waved from across the field. "Zethu, come here." She walked over, curious. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice playful. "This is Kwabena," Teboho grinned. "And this gun is Zethu." Their eyes met, and for a second, the world paused. Kwabena stared. There was something warm in her gaze, like a fire that didn't burn but healed. Zethu smiled a gentle, knowing smile and extended her hand. "I'm Zethu," she said. "Kwabena," he replied, his voice soft, almost unsure. They shook hands, but neither wanted to let go. They began talking. First about music. Both loved. Old highlife songs, then books, then their favorite meals, then about how they both hated exam week. Time flew. The sun dipped behind the trees, and yet they sat there like old friends reunited. By the end of the party, they had exchanged numbers. What followed were weeks filled with laughter and wonder. Zethu and Kwabena became shadows of each other. They met under trees, shared roasted groundnuts, talked late into the night. Their conversations went deep, dreams, fears, village stories. But there was one thing they never really talked about: their fathers. Kwabena rarely mentioned his. And Zethu, well, she didn't know what to say. How do you describe a man you've never met? One evening, while lying on the grass under a purple sky, Zethu looked over and whispered, "Do you ever feel like we were meant to find each other?" Kwabena smiled, brushing her knuckles. "Yes, like we were two parts of the same story." It didn't take long before they were officially together. On campus, they were known as the Moon and the Stars. Wherever one went, the other followed. They laughed, held hands, whispered silly jokes. It was young love at its purest. Eventually, Zethu moved into Kwabena's room. It was tiny, barely enough space for two people, but their love filled every corner. They shared meals, danced to soft music, and leaned on each other through hard days. Then came the moment that shattered everything. One warm Friday evening, the rain had just finished falling. The air smelled of wet dust and hibiscus flowers. Zethu lay on the bed, scrolling through old photos on her phone. Kwabena was beside her, his arm resting over her belly. "Look," she said, holding out the screen. "I found a picture of my dad. Mama gave it to me last week. He looked so young here, doesn't he?" Kwabena turned his head lazily. Then he froze. The air changed. The smile on his face vanished. His breath caught. His body sat upright slowly, like a man waking from a bad dream. Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice thin. Zethu looked confused. "It's my father. His name is Obafemi." Kwabena's heart dropped. His lips trembled. That's my father too." Silence. Zethu blinked. "What are you saying?" Kwabena's hands shook as he held the phone. "I'm not joking. That man in the picture, that's my Baba. He left when I was a boy. I still remember his face. I've never forgotten." Zethu pulled the phone back and stared. No, that can't be. This is my dad. He left Mama when I was a baby." Kwabena nodded slowly. "Then we are—" The phone slipped from Zethu's hand and fell onto the mat. Her body felt heavy, like the world had collapsed onto her chest. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." Kwabena buried his face in his hands. "How is this possible?" Zethu stood up, pacing, her mind spinning. "How could this happen?" "I don't know what to do anymore," Kwabena whispered, his voice breaking like dry twigs underfoot. "Zethu, I don't know anything right now. My mother told me he left us when I was little. I've only seen his face in old photographs, but that face, I will never forget it." Zethu felt as if the floor beneath her had turned into water. Her hands shook as she reached for the corner of the mattress to steady herself. Everything she knew, everything she believed about her life was now twisted beyond recognition. "Kwabena," she finally managed to say, her voice small. "What do we do now?" Tears welled up in her eyes, heavy and hot. "Just a few hours. Ago, they were lovers wrapped in each other's arms, speaking of dreams, of children, of forever. And now they sat in silence, haunted by a truth they never asked for." Kwabena slowly lifted his head, his eyes red and swollen. "We didn't know, Zethu," he said, choking on the words. "We didn't know we were family. We didn't know we were—" He couldn't finish. The word refused to come out. Zethu covered her face, sobbing softly. "We've been together for so long. We moved in together. We made plans. How could this happen?" Kwabena didn't have an answer. He sat still for a while, staring at the wall, then finally asked, "Do you think your mother knew?" Zethu shook her head slowly. "She's never said much about my father. All I know is he left when I was still in diapers. She rarely speaks his name." Kwabena let out a long sigh. "My mother never told me about siblings. She just said he left us. She never said he had another child somewhere else." Not once. The room felt colder. The silence between them was thick like fog. Zethu looked at Kwabena with eyes full of love and sorrow. "I still love you," she said. "That hasn't changed. But what now? What does love mean in a moment like this?" They sat like that until the sun began to rise. The next day they dressed quietly. No laughter, no teasing, just the sound of sandals on tile. They decided they needed answers, real answers, not guesses, not assumptions. They needed truth from the only person who could give it. Zethu led the way as they walked through dusty alleys toward her childhood home. The air was heavy with the smell of roasted groundnuts and charcoal smoke. Children ran past with school bags bouncing behind them. But Kwabena and Zethu walked in silence, like people heading to a burial. When they arrived, Mama Jovia was sewing outside, sitting on a stool under the shade of a mango tree. Her fingers worked fast, her eyes focused on the cloth. She looked up and smiled, but the smile froze when she saw Kwabena beside her daughter. Her hands stopped. The needle slipped from her fingers. "Zethu," she said cautiously, her eyes narrowing. "Who is this?" Zethu took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Mama, this is Kwabena," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He was my boyfriend," Mama Jovia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stared at Kwabena, her eyes darting between him and Zethu, panic rising in her chest. "No," she whispered, stepping back. "No, this cannot be." Kwabena stepped forward gently, his hands raised in peace. "Mama, please. We are not here to cause trouble. But we need the truth, and we need it now. Please, before I collapse from the weight in my chest." Mama Jovia's face drained of color. Her lips quivered. "Is Obafemi, is he Zethu's father too?" Kwabena asked directly. Tears filled Mama Jovia's eyes instantly. She turned away, then turned back again. "Yes," she said in a voice barely louder than a breath. "Yes, he is." The world spun for Zethu. She dropped into the nearest chair, her knees too weak to hold her. Her chest heaved with sobs. "Mama, why didn't you tell me?" Mama Jovia knelt beside her daughter, her voice thick with regret. "I never thought this day would come, Zethu. I didn't know he had another child. I thought Obafemi was gone forever. I buried his memory because it hurt too much." Kwabena felt like fire was burning inside him. "You could have said something. Anything. She should have known she had a brother out there," Mama Jovia wept. "I didn't know, I swear to you, I didn't know he had a son. I only knew he was a restless man who disappeared from my life. I never dreamed the two of you would meet." Zethu stood, her hands shaking. "We've lived together, Mama. We've shared everything. If I had known, I would have walked away before it ever began." The pain in her voice was unbearable. Kwabena paced the room, his fists clenched. He was not angry at Zethu. He was not angry at her mother. He was angry at fate, at silence, at the choices of a man who had left behind children and destruction. "This could have been avoided," he said, his voice rising. "This pain, this shame, this confusion, it could have been avoided." Mama Jovia wiped her tears and reached for her daughter. "Please believe me. I never meant for this. I only wanted you to live freely, to grow without the weight of the past." Zethu pulled away, tears flooding her cheeks. "But the past came anyway, Mama, and now it has swallowed our future." Kwabena leaned against the wall, his chest rising and falling. He looked at Zethu, and in her eyes he saw love, but also fear. He saw himself reflected there, two hearts breaking over a truth neither of them asked for. "I still love you," Zethu said quietly, walking toward him. "I don't know what we are anymore, but I know how I feel." Kwabena nodded slowly. "Me too, I don't know what to call us. But I know this wasn't wrong. We didn't choose it." After the truth came out that Zethu and Kwabena were blood siblings, their world turned upside down. What began as love now lived under a shadow they could not escape. The same hands that once held joy now clung to pain. Zethu had returned to her hostel after the visit with her mother, but she couldn't sleep. Her mind played scenes over and over again. His voice, his touch, the dreams they built. It was all tangled now, beautiful, tragic, and confusing. She tried to stay away. She told herself it was for the best, but love is a stubborn flame. Even when wind and water try to put it out, it keeps glowing softly in the heart. One night, unable to hold back anymore, Zethu picked up her phone and called him. Her voice shook as soon as he answered. "Kwabena," she whispered, her chest rising and falling. "I can't stop thinking about you. I know what we shared was wrong, but I don't know how to let go." There was silence for a moment, and then Kwabena's voice came through, low and aching. "I feel the same," he said. "I've tried to forget. I've tried to stay away. But it's like my body remembers you, even when my mind tells me to forget." Zethu broke down, crying into the receiver. "I don't want to lose you. You took my heart, Kwabena. I don't think I can love any man the way I loved you." On that call they cried together, two broken hearts wrapped in a love that neither time nor truth could erase. They blamed the silence of their parents. They blamed the lies, the abandonment, the missing years. But they did not blame each other. And so they made a decision. They would stay together as quietly. Their love became a secret, wrapped in silence and hidden from the world. They avoided friends, family, even classmates. They stopped going to parties, skipped lectures, kept to themselves. They walked past each other like strangers on campus, but behind closed doors, their arms still found each other. It wasn't just romance, it was a bond, a connection too deep to explain. They hadn't chosen their bloodline, they hadn't chosen to fall in love, but they had chosen to survive it. In those months they lived like shadows, lovers in hiding. Their story whispered only between four walls, but such love, no matter how hidden, leaves traces. Zethu began to sink. The weight of their secret, the shame of it, the questions that never stopped swirling. It all became too much. She stopped eating, stopped laughing. She would sit on the bed for hours, staring at nothing, her body still as stone, Kwabena noticed. He cooked for her, held her while she cried. He tried to be strong, though he too was breaking. One afternoon, Mama Jovia came to visit. She walked in quietly and found Zethu lying curled on the bed like a child, her eyes empty. "My daughter," she said gently, sitting beside her, "I know your heart is heavy." Zethu didn't respond. Her lips were dry, her spirit tired. Mama Jovia placed a hand on her shoulder. "Zethu, I have loved you since the day you opened your eyes, and it is because I love you that I must say this. What you are doing is not right." Zethu blinked slowly, her voice dry. "Everyone hates us. Even you." "No," Mama Jovia said firmly. "No one hates you. We are just afraid. Afraid of what this could mean. Afraid of what it has already done." Zethu sat up, her eyes red and swollen. "But Mama, I love him. I tried to let go. I did. But I feel like a tree whose roots were planted beside him. I can't just be pulled out and planted somewhere else." Tears filled Mama Jovia's eyes. "I understand, my child. But sometimes love alone is not enough. Sometimes we must choose what is good over what feels good." Zethu wept into her mother's lap. "I wish I could turn back time. I wish we had known." Across town, Kwabena received a visit of his own. His mother, Amina, stood at the doorway of his room, her arms folded across her chest. She looked thinner, older. She had heard the whispers from the market women, the gossip that travelled faster than the wind. "Kwabena," she said softly, sitting beside him, "you are my son, my only son, and I love you more than the world." Kwabena nodded, his throat tight. "This is not your fault," she continued. "But please, please, you must end this relationship with your sister, before it's too late." Kwabena stared at the wall. "Why does everyone think we have committed a crime? We didn't know, Mama. We didn't choose this." Amina placed her hand on his back. I know you didn't. But now you do. And what you choose next will matter." Kwabena shook his head slowly. "I can't leave her, Mama. I've tried, but my soul won't let me." "You must," Amina whispered. "For her, for yourself, for the child you once were who deserved better than this." But it wasn't just the mothers. Soon the entire community began to turn against them. Zethu's uncles and aunties called her names, shameful, disgraceful, cursed. They stopped visiting, refused to answer her calls. They told her she was no longer welcome in the family. Kwabena's old friends avoided him on campus. Some crossed the street when they saw him. Others spoke behind his back, laughing cruelly. Strangers stared, pointed, whispered, judged. But the most painful wound came from the man who started it all, Obafemi. Zethu decided to confront him. She had never spoken to him directly in her life, but she found his number. She called. Her hands trembled the entire time. When he answered, his voice was flat, unbothered. "Who is this?" "Zethu," she said, her voice shaking. "Your daughter." Silence. Then, a low sigh. "What do you want?" "Do you know what you've done?" she asked, tears already rolling down her cheeks. "Kwabena and I, we didn't know we were siblings. We fell in love. We built a home together. And now, we are ruined." Obafemi was silent again. Then he spoke with no emotion at all. "What's done is done. You're adults now. You'll deal with it." Zethu's lips parted in disbelief. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" "I don't have time for this," he muttered. "You destroyed us," she whispered. "And you don't even care." Before he could say more, she hung up. Her hands were shaking. Her heart felt like it had shattered into 1,000 pieces. She turned to Kwabena, who stood in the corner of the room having heard everything. "He doesn't care," she said. "He never did." Kwabena walked over, wrapped his arms around her, and held her as she cried. "Let him go," he said. "He was never a father, and we were never his mistake. We are his consequence." Zethu broke down in his arms. She sobbed until her chest hurt. All her life she had carried questions, dreams, and a hidden hope that maybe, just maybe, her father would one day reach for her. But now that hope had shattered. And yet, even in that pain, Kwabena held her. Just like always, the weeks that followed were some of the hardest they had ever known. They leaned on each other, not just for comfort, but for survival. Judgments came like heavy rain from all sides. People whispered when they walked by. Old friends looked away. Market women paused in gossip only long enough to spit words like abomination and disgrace. But Zethu and Kwabena stopped trying to explain. They stopped begging for understanding. They had already drowned in shame once. They refused to drown again. One evening, they sat together on the narrow wooden balcony of their rented room. The wind was soft. The moon hung low. In that stillness, Zethu turned to him and said, "We didn't choose this, but we can choose how we live with it." Kwabena looked at her, eyes full of love. "No matter what happens, Zethu, I will stand beside you. You're my heart, you always will be." She smiled faintly. "Then let's keep going, one day at a time." But life was not gentle with them. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, survival became a battle. They were young, yes, but love doesn't feed the stomach and courage doesn't pay rent. One afternoon, Kwabena sat on the edge of their bed, his hands covering his face. The walls around them were cracked. Their mattress sagged like a tired back. There was barely any food left in the cupboard. Zethu noticed the heaviness in his posture. She knelt before him, placed her hands on his knees and looked up. "Kwabena," she said softly, "we will find a way." He lifted his eyes, wet and full of worry. "We barely eat twice a day, Zethu. How are we supposed to survive when the baby comes?" Her heart pounded. "Yes," she whispered, "I'm carrying your child. But that child is also carrying us. We can't give up." Kwabena leaned back. His shoulders slumped. "I feel like I'm failing you." "No," she said, gripping his hands. "You're here, that's what matters." But outside their little room, the world was growing colder. When Zethu told her extended family about the pregnancy, they were furious. Her aunties called her shameful. Her uncles refused to speak to her. Some even sent messages saying she had cursed the family. Kwabena didn't fare better. His mother, Amina, who had once been his strength, now avoided him entirely. She said nothing, but her silence was louder than any words. They were alone. Rent became a problem. Their landlord gave warning after warning. The shopkeeper where they bought food on credit began to frown when they walked in. Zethu sometimes pretended to have a stomachache, just so Kwabena would eat the little rice they had, but she never complained. "We'll be fine," she always said, forcing a smile. "We faced worse." They both knew that wasn't true. Then came another blow. Kwabena's health began to fail. He started having seizures, sharp, violent episodes that left him trembling and gasping. The first time it happened, Zethu was terrified. He had collapsed in front of her, convulsing on the floor. She screamed, she cried, but she didn't run. Instead, she grabbed a pillow, held his head gently, and whispered, "I'm here." "You'll be okay." More seizures came, each one more frightening than the last. One night around 3 a.m., Kwabena fell off the bed. His body shook uncontrollably, his mouth foamed, his eyes rolled back. Zethu didn't panic. She moved fast. She wrapped him in a thick blanket, threw on her slippers, and rushed him to the clinic nearby. The streets were empty, lit only by flickering lamps and the moon. Her feet pounded the ground, her breath came in gasps, but she didn't stop. At the hospital, the nurses recognized her. "You again?" one said gently. "You're strong." Zethu managed a tired smile. "I love him," she said. "I'll carry him to the end of the world if I must." The doctor gave Kwabena medicine, but he needed regular treatment. Medicine they couldn't afford. Still, they didn't give up. They had every reason to: poverty, judgment, rejection, illness, but their hearts refused to let go. One evening, as they sat on the same balcony where they once made vows of hope, Zethu placed her hand on her belly and said, "We made this child in love, and I will never abandon it." Kwabena nodded. "We didn't choose this life, but we can choose to give it meaning." People in town continued to mock them. Some even spat when they passed. "Look at them," they'd say. Siblings pretending to be husband and wife. But they walked tall, they held hands, they met the stares. And in private, when the nights were long and the tears came quietly, they held each other close and whispered promises the world would never hear. Zethu became his rock, especially when his seizures left him weak, his body aching. She bathed him, fed him, sat with him for hours while he rested. She was not just his lover. She became his nurse, his anchor, his shelter. And Kwabena, in his own way, stayed strong for her. When she cried in her sleep, he would wipe her tears. When she woke with hunger, he would go out and find her bread, even if it meant begging. One such day, as Kwabena lay weak on the bed after another seizure, he looked up at her with tired but determined eyes. "Zethu," he said, "I think it's time we tell the world our story." Zethu blinked. "You mean publicly?" He nodded. "Yes. We ask for help. There are people out there who raise money for shoes, for vacations, even for jokes. Maybe someone will see us and understand that we're not monsters. We're just lost and trying." Zethu hesitated. "But what if they laugh? What if they insult us more?" Kwabena took her hand and placed it over her growing belly. "Even if the world spits on us, we have to try for this child. We can't do this alone anymore." That night, they cleaned the room as best as they could. They hung a white cloth behind them to hide the cracked wall. Then Kwabena sat down, took a deep breath, and turned on the camera. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Hello. My name is Kwabena," he began. "I'm a final-year university student. I'm sick. I have epilepsy. My partner Zethu is pregnant. We've been abandoned by everyone, family, friends, even our community. We're not perfect, we made mistakes, but we didn't choose to fall in love not knowing we were siblings." He paused. His voice broke. "I want to be a good man. I want to finish my education, get a job, and provide for my partner and our unborn child. But I'm drowning in debt. I can't even afford my medication. Please, if you have anything to give, food, money, advice, help us survive. That's all we're asking." Zethu joined him at the end of the video. She placed her hand over her belly and looked directly at the camera. "We didn't plan this life," she said softly, "but we chose to keep our child because we believe that love, even when broken, can still be beautiful. Please don't judge us. Just help us if you can." They posted the video online. And then they waited. At first there was silence. Then the comments started coming in, but they weren't what they hoped for. "Disgusting. Sick people. This is a curse on our culture. Go and repent. You deserve every hardship you're facing." Some people didn't stop at comments. They made videos mocking them, shared screenshots of their video with cruel captions. The insults spread like wildfire. Zethu read the first few, then stopped. Her hands shook, her eyes filled with tears. "They hate us," she whispered. Kwabena looked at her, heart heavy. Let them. If they choose hate over understanding, that's their shame, not ours. Still, the weight of rejection was too much. They quietly took down the video and went offline. But though the world turned its back on them, they did not turn on each other. Even in their shame, they still shared the same bed. Even in their fear, they still held hands while walking to class. Even in hunger, they still laughed when they could. They refused to disappear. One morning, as the sun peeked through the torn curtain, Zethu watched Kwabena sleep. His chest rose and fell slowly. His arm twitched slightly, a sign a seizure might come again soon. She leaned over, placed a soft kiss on his forehead, and whispered, "You're still mine." Later that week, as they sat together watching children play near the roadside, Kwabena said something she would never forget. "I know people want us to disappear, to undo our past, to vanish into the dirt. But I won't do that, Zethu. I won't leave you. I won't leave this child." She squeezed his hand. "Even if the world hates us, we still have a story, and we will live it." The months rolled. On their baby bump grew. Their struggle deepened, but so did their strength. Zethu found ways to earn small coins, braiding hair for classmates, helping women sell akara at the roadside. Kwabena, though often weak, taught math to younger students and helped fix old phones. They learned to live with less. They learned to find joy in tiny things, boiled yam shared at midnight, laughter under a leaking roof, or an old song on the neighbor's radio that reminded them of better days. One evening, during a quiet moment, Zethu turned to him. "Do you think our child will hate us one day?" Kwabena thought for a while before replying. "Maybe, maybe not, but if they ask us one day, 'Why did you stay together?' I will say, 'Because love isn't always clean. Sometimes it's messy. Sometimes it's the only light you have in a dark world.'" And so they continued. Two souls walking a path no one else would dare walk. They weren't heroes. They weren't saints. Just two broken hearts that refused to stop beating, even as the world spit on them, even as hunger handsawed at their bones, even as the wind whispered, "You do not belong." They kept walking, because to them love, flawed, forbidden, and fragile, was still worth fighting for. And somewhere in that quiet strength, they found dignity, and perhaps even a little peace. In life, we do not always choose our path. Sometimes the past walks into our future wearing the face of love. But even when shame and sorrow come uninvited, we must still hold on to kindness, to honesty, and to one another. Love, though tested, can still be a place of healing when the world turns its back. If this story moved your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We tell stories that reflect our truths, our pain, and our courage, one tale at a time. Tap the bell and let the next story find you.